Hey everyone, Daily Tech here again, doing a quick follow-up video to the one I did about a year ago on the Xbox One Kinect. Now I've seen a number of questions in the comments section of my previous video on how to mod this thing to work on your PC, so I figured I'd put this video together to answer a few of those questions. Also, I've had a little bit of time to mess around with this thing for a bit, so I have discovered some really awesome features about it that I wanted to share. Now if you haven't seen the video on how to mod the Xbox One Kinect to work on your PC, I'll put a link to it in the corner of your screen. So let's start things off with a few of the FAQ items. For starters, the biggest issue that most people run into when they mod this thing is that when they plug it into the computer, it either fails to detect, it keeps turning on and off, or you run into a whole bunch of other problems. Luckily, that issue for the most part is really simple to fix. The reason why 9 out of 10 times is that this thing is super picky about what USB controller it's plugged into. Now the Xbox One Kinect is only going to work with two different USB controllers. That's the Intel USB 3.0 controller or the Renesas NEC 3.0 controller. If you plug your Kinect into any other USB controller other than those two, you are most likely going to run into a whole host of problems. To find out if your computer has either of these controllers, open up Device Manager and go all the way down to the USB section there. In here, you should see what controllers you have listed. You'll see in mine, I have a Renesas controller, which is an expansion card I've installed, an Intel host controller, which is what my motherboard has on it, and an AS Media controller, which is my USB 3.1 host controller that came on my motherboard. If you're not sure what host controller your Xbox One Kinect is plugged into, find the camera somewhere in your list, then click on it, then click on View, and then Devices by Connection. This will show you what is connected to that controller and what other devices are also connected to it as well. Now if you're looking to buy a USB 3.0 expansion card, you can either ask the manufacturer what controller it uses, or if the photos on the website are really nice before you buy it, you can maybe zoom in and see what it is. Or you may even be able to download the driver for that controller card and see which controller driver is going to be installed. Generally it's listed with the controller's name. Don't worry, Renesas is a very popular chip to use in USB 3.0 expansion cards, so you really won't have to look all that far. The second thing I've seen asked a few times is what sort of power adapter is required, and if power supply A or B will work. Now I'll try to clear that up just a little bit right here. The non-negotiable part of the power supply is that it needs to be exactly 12 volts. Every power supply should tell you right on the sticker what the voltage is. If it doesn't, then I would definitely recommend just throwing it away and not guessing. The next part is the current. This part can vary a little bit. Since current is not pushed by the power adapter, you can have as much as you want. But the power adapter must be able to give you at least 2.4 amps from what a lot of the people are saying in the comments of my previous video. So this will be written either 2.4 amps or 2400 milliamps. That spec of power adapter will work just fine along with anything else that will have a higher current rating. Now the only downfall of using something with a higher current rating is that generally it's going to cost you a little bit more. Other than that, it'll work just as well. Now the last thing I want to talk about is the performance on this camera. These things are absolute bandwidth hogs. So whether you mod it yourself or if you buy the official adapter for it, it's going to demand a ton of bandwidth on that USB 3 controller. This being said, it will absolutely not work on a USB 2.0 port, so don't even bother trying. But if you get any standard and supported USB 3 controller card, it should work without an issue. So if your computer has only one USB 3 controller on it and you're using this camera on it, be very careful of how many other USB 3.0 devices you have plugged into that same controller. So if you are recording a little bit, just make sure there's no data transfers on a USB 3 hard drive or anything else that's using a lot of USB 3 traffic. And the second half of this part that I want to talk about is if you're using any kind of hubs or repeaters with it. Now to get this camera about 12 feet away from my computer, I had to use a hub in between just to repeat the signal. Now I tested 3 different hubs between my camera and my computer to get that extra distance, and 2 of them gave me terrible performance. We're talking 1 to 2 frames per second. So if at all possible, try to get yourself at least a 10-foot cable on your camera. That way you don't have to worry about trying to extend the camera at all. So this is just a bit of a warning in case you see things acting a little bit squirrely. Now that you've got some of the kinks worked out and everything's running the way you expect now, let's talk about some of the features about this camera that really makes it pretty awesome. For starters, it's a badass webcam, and if you haven't guessed it already, I filmed this entire video using my Xbox One Kinect. It's a 1080p camera, it works in really low light, And right now you can't tell, but this is a really dimly lit room. And the field of view is just massive on this thing. The next thing that's super cool about this camera is that it's a 3D camera, which means you can do 3D imaging with it. Now, one of my friends messed around with this for a bit, and this is a video he got of 3D imaging himself. It hasn't been cleaned up at all, but it is a really great start for just screwing around. Also, since it's a 3D camera that actually has some sort of depth perception to it, you can use a software called Live and use this thing to create a virtual green screen behind you. Here's a really quick clip of what I mean by that. I'm also going to leave some links of where you can find out more about this software below. Now with that being said, I realize I haven't uploaded a whole ton of content to YouTube lately, but I am going to be looking at streaming a little bit on Twitch. I'll most likely just be playing some different VR games, so if you want to check out to see what they look like, feel free to stop by, drop me a follow, and you might catch me online from time to time. And last, but certainly not least, this camera also works with Driver 4 VR, and that's if you want to use head tracking or full body tracking in any kind of VR games. This is actually the reason why I decided to mod this thing in the first place. I am sure though that there's a lot more things you could do with this camera that I'm not aware of, so if you guys have figured out anything different or really neat, please let me know in the comments below, and that way I can try them out for myself and hopefully find something new. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.